So, recently I had just gotten the first 3 volumes of American Vampire, and here I am going to do my review of Volume 1. In a nutshell, booyah, this comic is amazing. Now, American Vampire is, for those who don't know, it's a comic that is centered around these, for the first volume, these 2 characters called Skinner Sweet and Pearl Jones, and it's kind of separated 2 different stories, where we find out Skinner Sweet's origin in a series that, it follows 2 different stories, but they kind of coalesce. The first one follows with Scott Snyder with the girl known as Pearl Jones becoming the second American vampire, which is a completely new breed of vampire after she is murdered by other European-era vampires and resurrected by Skinner Sweet, who is the first American vampire. And also we have his story, which chronicles his origin, written by Stephen King, who most of you guys I'm pretty sure all of you know who Stephen King is. Now, American Vampire is probably one of the best vampire comics I've ever read. Now, most of the time, most of you guys know that I enjoy my vampire series bloody and, animalistic vampires. These ones meet a very good ground of they're animalistic, but they also have a sense of class to them. It's kind of like the Dracula we know, Christopher Lee's era Dracula, in some ways. The cool thing about these stories is that, both stories, is that they very much coalesce. One taking place in the early 18th century, and the other one in 1920s. It has a very noir story. It basically takes place in Los Angeles during the 20s and follows Pearl Jones, who wants to be an actress, along with her friend Hattie, and, an actor feeds her to his bosses, and Skinner Sweet rescues her, and she becomes a vampire. This story, in and of itself, is very interesting. Pearl Jones is a very likable character. She is this very innocent girl who suddenly has her world turned upside down, and she instantly is like, you know what, I'm going to use these powers to slaughter everything I have found. Anyone who's wronged me. And it's so cool that, rather than, oh, I don't want to do this, I'm not a monster. No, she's fucking pissed off that, she was killed, and now she's an undead monster. And then we have the character of Skinner Sweet. Now, Skinner Sweet is kind of like one of the main protagonists of the series, but he's also a terrible human being. He's kind of like, the best way I could describe him is like, he's like Clay Morrow from Sons of Anarchy. He's a terrible person, but you focus on him a lot of the time. Or should I say, Clay's dead now in Sons of Anarchy, so yeah, he's kind of like, he does have that Clay Morrow kind of persona to him. But Skinner is a terrible person, but he hates he's pretty much an outlaw that was resurrected by a vampire, and it's funny too that vampires are now have a banking committee. They now own a lot of the money in the U.S., which I find is hilarious because now they're bloodsuckers in the economic sense too. The irony is not lost on me. Trust me. Like I said, the irony is not lost on me. So the artwork by Raphael Albuquerque, I cannot pronounce the artist in here. The artwork in here, I really don't want to butcher this man's last name, but it was really well done. I absolutely loved the artwork in here. The colors were amazing, everything. And the characters are very likable. I mean, Skinner Sweet, as unlikable as a horrible human being as he is, he's actually kind of fun to read. He is a very fun character to read in and of itself. It is just a lot of fun to read that character and his persona. So, we have Skinner Sweet and we have Pearl Jones, and we have Pearl Jones' friend Hattie, who betrays her all in the name of, just becoming a movie star. And then we have her lover, Henry Preston, who's also a very likable guy. He takes in stride that she's a vampire now. And what I like about these new breeds of vampire, the American vampire, is that there's something totally different, and there's not a lot of them. Like I said, the book pretty much starts out that there are only two. There are only 2 American vampires. There were 3, and now it's kind of like 2.5, and I'll get into that in a second. But basically, the American vampires, starting with Skinner Sweet, is that they can go in the sunlight. Sunlight actually makes them stronger. They are resistant to all other basic forms of vampirism, and their only time when they're weak is when the new moon is out. When a new moon is out, that's when they're at their most vulnerable. So, and of course, if you haven't read the later volumes, I'll get into that when I get, because like I said, I now have the first 3 volumes, so I'll be reviewing those later, and we'll be talking more about that. So, there's literally no known weakness, and the other vampire, the European-bred vampires are like, oh shit, this thing, we need to get rid of these things before they become more of a pest. And Pearl and Skinner, they don't really work together. In fact, Skinner is actually in Pearl Jones's story, it is more or less her story. Skinner is hardly in the book. He's only in there for a few pages. He's like, hey, what's up, and leaves. You know, I gave you these powers, here you go. So Skinner is not really prominent in in the first volume, unless you look at the Stephen King stories, which the Stephen King stories are also really good. It follows Skinner's, like I said, Skinner Sweet's origin, told through a novelist who witnessed the events in a book called Bad Blood, and he's basically telling all these people the real truth of what Skinner Sweet really was. Skinner was bitten by one of these vampires known as Percy, who was part of the vampire banking clan from Europe, and what they are, and what Skinner Sweet does is he gets his revenge, and the person who killed him, James Book, is later turned into a vampire, and he sleeps with his goddaughter, who later becomes... They kind of allude in the second volume that she's half vampire, kind of. But it is a lot of fun. It is a lot... This book is a lot of fun. Skinner Sweet, like I said, as terrible as as a undead being as he is, he's a lot of fun to read, because he is offered $10 million, like $1 million, which is a lot back in in 1909. And he's basically like, you know what? I would pay $1 million to do what I'm going to do. So he basically drags Percy out of his mansion and leaves him in the front yard to burn to death. And he just walks away whistling. So, this book is amazing. If this book has been out for a while. I've recently gotten a hold, like I said, the first 3 volumes. I've been loving it. It's you haven't read it yet. It's a lot of fun. If you're looking for something, if Twilight has cheated you on vampires, or you know the whole vampire medium's kind of dead because of it, go check out American Vampire. It certainly breathes a lot of new life into the vampire genre. And I've been reading through Volume 2, and that's been really good. And I can't wait to review and I can't wait to talk about that. So all in all, guys, once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this review, and if you haven't yet, go check out American Vampire. You'll be doing yourself a lot of good by reading this comic. Alright, guys, I'm out.